teachers and outreach in terms of CERN. So the next question, I suppose we have to decompose it into two parts. The question generally is it hard to work at CERN? But it seems like the person had an engineer in mind. So can you decompose this question into two parts? How hard is it for you as who you are? And then do you know how hard it is for a scientist or engineer?
Okay, absolutely. So, I mean, the question is absolutely correct. I mean, my job is a very unique job because I'm the only teacher program manager at CERN, but there are so many other jobs at CERN in so many different areas. And so usually people also ask us, what is our standard day at CERN? Which is impossible to answer because it really depends. But let's decompose the question. First off, from my perspective, my job is awesome. I mean, it's a lot of work because we really run a lot of programs. We have a lot of teachers who interact with CERN, but that is the beauty of my job because I don't think I will spoil any secrets that physics teachers, if they get to come to CERN, they are really excited. They really are happy because for them it's really like going to Hogwarts. You know, you get the letter to go to Hogwarts, and for teachers that's kind of CERN is the Hogwarts of science, we like to call it now. And so as my job is really every week I get to welcome teachers who are automatically excited and happy, and then they see me as the face of CERN and they project all their love and gratitude to me. So I get showered in love and luck every week, so I cannot complain. There is, of course, one element to my job that is very stressful, but I enjoy it. And of course, it's something I'm currently missing because we don't have teacher programs at CERN. But whenever we have teachers at CERN, we of course also invite them to an official dinner. I mean, that, you know, if you have a teacher group here for a week, you have to celebrate a little bit with an official dinner. And since CERN is located close to Geneva in Switzerland, the official dinner is the official food of Geneva, which is cheese fondue, so a melted pot of cheese. And that makes my job a little bit stressful or enjoyable, depending on how you look at it, because in normal times before Corona, I ate at least one cheese fondue every week. So my all-time record from the year 2019 was 43 cheese fondues that I ate throughout the whole year. So that, of course, is stressful. Okay, but now moving on, that is my job, and I'm happy to do it. If you now look at engineers or technicians or PhD students in physics analysis, I think their job is exactly as, you know, stressful or busy as my job, just depending on the specific orientation they're following. But I think there is one thing that I don't have to do that other people at CERN have to do, which I'm really happy I don't have to do it. They have to work in shifts because either when we run the accelerators and we take data, we do that really 24 hours. So that means for the control rooms, for example, there have to be people on shift or at least on call throughout the night. And I really am very happy that my job at some point stops before midnight sometimes. But there are really poor people who have to do shifts, and the same is true also now where we are maintaining and upgrading our machines, where people are also working in shifts, and then, you know, having a shift after midnight to work on an accelerator. That I think adds to the, well, it doesn't really add to the work-life balance. Let's put it this way.
Right. Thank you for that answer. Working at CERN, I think oftentimes for people that are interested in, you know, STEM things, is often something like a holy grail. So working at CERN is the thing that you want to do. So there's a question: how did you get this job?
Very good question. Although I think my approach is kind of the standard way, but there's no universal way of how to do it. So initially, I got an offer to work at CERN for within a 9-month contract for a German university, and so they hired me to run their outreach program at CERN for 9 months, and that was about 10 years ago. Because I'm a very lucky person, I keep insisting that anyone who meets me should rub my shoulder, because I think my luck projects on other people. I'm very lucky because I did my 9-month contract, and then my then supervisor, who is still my supervisor actually, said, hey, you know what, would you be interested in staying? We could, you know, maybe you want to apply for the PhD stipendium, because I'm Austrian and Austria has some small slots that are funded for PhD students. So I applied, I got it. I'm a very happy and lucky person. So I get to stay for 3 years doing my PhD. During my PhD, I got the offer, at the end of my PhD, I got the offer to do a postdoc before even finishing my PhD, so I could stay longer. And then I even got, I applied for a staff position, which is like a, not really permanent, but it's the employed member of personnel, so to speak, for 5 years. And I applied and I got it, so I'm very lucky. And I think that story where I joined with a 9-month contract, and that was 10 years ago. I think that is very similar to anyone who is permanent at CERN, although most of them start with one of our entry programs, because we do have dedicated programs for university students. So that could be the summer student program, or our technical student program, or the administrative student program. I think we will talk about these a little bit later at some point, or we can talk about them now. But there is no clear way of there's not one way how to get to CERN. And maybe what I should also add is that I am, of course, I'm a member of the personnel, so I'm employed by CERN, but CERN essentially is a service provider for accelerated particles. That's what we do. That's our day job. We provide accelerated particles to users. So there's a really big group of people who we call users, and they use the laboratory, they use our facilities, but they are not employed by us. They are sent here via their institutes. And so that's why, as I said, there's not one way to get to CERN. There are thousands of ways depending on which country and which institute you're from. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I hope that your luck also rubs off through the internet, because a lot of people would be happy to touch your magic shoulder. Yeah,
we can try.
We'll see in a couple of years what happens with the people that are currently on Zoom. All right, a question I think you'll like. What do you like most about your job at CERN?
Yeah, well, fantastic question. I'm just taking a deep breath because there are so many things that I enjoy working at CERN. The first and most important thing that comes to my mind is, for sure, it's as international as it gets, which means I get to work on a daily basis with people from all around the world, which enables me to learn so much, because, you know, it just widens, or at least I believe it widens my perspective on the world. It forces me to speak or communicate in different questions, in different languages, of course, and make sure that you get questions correct. The official languages at CERN are both English and French, but there's a third unofficial language, which is hand waving, smiling, and nodding, because sometimes, you know, the language confusion can happen. So that is something that I really enjoy. And of course, at CERN, you really have so many smart and so many really, really interesting people with whom you can just have a coffee, because, you know, it's a huge organization, but people are on a first name basis. People are, you know, open to discussing anything you want, because that's exactly how we progress. And there are some Nobel Prize winning scientists who are still based at CERN, and you can have lunch sitting in the cafeteria and then looking to your left and see, there's a Nobel Prize winner, hello. Then you breathe in the air that the Nobel Prize winner is breathing out. I mean, that's just to give you 2 or 3 examples of why CERN is fantastic. But I think I should probably also put a small bracket to that. Of course, CERN in itself is really the largest research organization in that sense, but I think what I just described can also be found in other research laboratories that are also internationally by virtue. So, but that's something that I clearly enjoy.
Right. I vividly remember back when I was at CERN for the teachers program, the feeling that you go into the cafeteria, you put down your tray, and there's so many people from all kinds of different backgrounds. They're all talking about the most recent thing they saw on the monitor, like what particles they've just detected or whatever. And you can just feel it, even if you don't know if those people are Nobel Prize winners or if they aren't, you just feel it in the room that it's kind of oozing intellect, right? So that's a great feeling. I can totally agree with that.
There's also, maybe just to add to the restaurant, there was a big discussion a couple of years ago, because the restaurant company wanted to get rid of paper towels, or the napkins. They wanted to get rid of them. And the scientists at CERN really disagreed, because from our experience, most of our ideas have been written down on napkins when people went for a coffee and just had an idea and just sketched something out. And usually that was the first idea. So without napkins, I'm not sure if CERN could exist.
All right. Okay, then. Thank you for that. We now have a question, as these are high school students we have listening in on us. They are naturally interested on what are the possibilities. If you're a university student, what are your avenues for getting to CERN? Might there be a summer internship maybe? And what do you have to do? How great do you have to be to get to CERN?
Very good question. So It is true. For high school students, our offers are very, very limited, unfortunately. So what we usually advertise is that first finish your high school and then go to university and study anything related to, you know, science, engineering. And then at university level, that's where the magic happens. That's where you can apply to start your internships at CERN. So the biggest wave of entry is the so-called summer student program. That is something that really has been, this is our flagship program, has been running since the very beginning. And that means that university students who study something related to science and engineering, and they have completed 3 years of their university education. So 3 years is the threshold. Then they can apply for the so-called summer student program, where they can stay up to 3 months, so the full summer, fully funded at CERN. And it's not just, you know, coming here and cooking coffee or something. They are really, really selected to work in dedicated projects. A good friend of mine, for example, she came to CERN as a summer student, and she worked in our antimatter factory, because at CERN we really have a place that is called the antimatter factory, where we, as the name says, artificially create antimatter, small amounts, to study them. And her summer student job was for a couple of months during the summer to really work on a trap that traps the antimatter that is produced there. That was a summer job. Fantastic. By now, you know, she returned as a PhD student, and by now she's a professor in Switzerland for physics. So that clearly is the way to go. So so if anyone is interested in anything CERN does, I would just recommend going to the website careers.cern. So CERN has a top level domain, so it's really .cern, that's it. Careers.cern, you can find all the information there, but please don't be upset that we don't necessarily have any options for high school students at the moment. But the moment you're at university level, you can do that. And of course, if you ask me, what does it take to get to CERN? I mean, I'm not going to tell you any secrets that a lot of people want to work at CERN, obviously. It is the Hogwarts of science. And yes, the selection is tough, meaning that your grades should be as good as they can get. So whatever you are able to produce on your grade report, make sure it's good. You have to be motivated. You have to be resistant to stress, maybe. I think that is something that also identifies with successful researchers, that you have resilience. But other than that, what I heard from many people is that they applied the first year and they didn't get it, and they applied a second year, and then some of them got the position. So as I said, resilience is something that is very important in our everyday life anyway.
Can you perhaps expand, like, let's say I'm a high school student who wants to go to CERN. Ultimately, do I have to study nuclear physics, or?
No. Oh, very good. Oh, sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right. I should probably give way more detail to that. I think upfront we can say study anything. I mean, anything that is somehow related with science. It can be physics, it can be engineering, it can be math, it can be chemistry. The options are there. Of course, there are very, very limited options if you go abroad from science, because after all, CERN is really a research laboratory for high energy physics. So if you study physics, for example, it's straightforward if it's engineering. But for example, in our team, where our team has a lot of PhD students and postdocs who do research in education research, and they are former teachers, for example, we also have physics teachers or physics teacher students who then do their summer student position at CERN. So also that is possible. But of course, they have to be science teacher students, for example, to have the background knowledge. But CERN is really very, very broad. There are some limitations that are detailed on the website. So what you can do, what you cannot do, but in principle, for the summer student internships or our student internships, anything that has to do with STEM, I think is the short word that we can use in this case, will be okay.
As the saying goes, all roads lead to CERN.
That is true. That is true. You just have to know when to turn left. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. And I think that concludes our questions about CERN, more or less. We then have a couple of questions that regard particle physics in general, less about the institution, more about particle physics as is. And so the first question, I think everybody has this on their mind, is, do you have a favorite particle?
Yes, of course. Well, I should probably be more precise. I have many favorite particles, and their likability changes from day to day. But there is one that I like the most because I did a test. There is a particle identities test that our team at CERN developed, where you can compare your personality to the properties of an elementary particle. And so I did the test, and turns out I'm a charm quark, or at least charm quark.
I wonder why.
I have no idea either. So that, of course, now is my most favorite particle. If any one of you is interested in doing this test yourself, you just have to, well, probably I can put it in the chat. I think
Sure.
that is the easiest. Now I'm trying to talk to you and type something that sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. All right, and there we go. And there we go, chat. Boom. So I'm hoping that now most people still stay with us, but on this link you can then do for free. You just have to answer a couple of questions that fit your personality, and then the test or the quiz will tell you which particle fits your personality best.
I have a feeling that I might be the strange quark, perhaps.
You will have to do the quiz to figure it out for sure.
I'm sure I will. All right. So Džef is a charm quark. Good to know. Very well then. So here's the question that's also connected with the lectures we had today, and it's remained unanswered.
Oh.
We've discussed that there are 3 generations of particles, and the question is about the electron, the one that people usually know before they hear about the standard model. So we have discovered the electron, the muon, which is a heavier electron, and the tau particle, which is a heavier muon. And why does it stop there? Why don't we have a 4th, a 5th, a 6th, and so forth?
And no one knows that answer. Sorry to reply with a counter question, but no one in the room knows the answer to the question.
I don't think so.
That's a shame, because we also have no idea. I was hoping someone would know it. We have no idea. It's probably the best question, or the most difficult unanswered question. We have no idea why we see 3. We call them generations, because it's true both within the leptons, but also with the quarks. We see 3 generations. We have no idea why. We also have no idea if there's a 4th one, if there's a 5th one. We have no idea. Nothing in the standard model of particle physics tells us that there have to be 3 generations to begin with, and it doesn't make any predictions as to are there other generations. So unfortunately, this question I cannot answer. But if anyone in the room figures that out or has any idea, call us. Really call us. We would be more than happy. And if you can answer this question, or if you can, provide us with hints for the 4th or 5th generation, I'm pretty sure you will not have time to put on your nice suit. You will get your Nobel Prize directly. They will just give it to you, and yeah. So yeah, a very good question, but unfortunately something I'm not able to answer.
Thank you. That's a great answer, because I think it shows that even though we think that we have a developed theory that explains everything, there's still a lot of uncertainties and unclear things about why things are the way they are. There's a lot of work there to be still done, and more colliders to be built to answer these questions.
Potentially, yes.
All right. So as we close this discussion on particle physics, there's a couple of questions that ultimately boil down to the same one. Recently, CERN, I think at the end of March or somewhere around that time, discovered a new particle, or a couple new particles at CERN. And the question is, what do you think about this? They say that these particles have been detected, but we are unsure if they're really there. What are your thoughts if they are there? What unsolved questions might this cover? What is the impact of this?
Okay. Now I'm thinking very hard what that question could refer to, because as far as I'm concerned, we did not discover any new particles recently. I think I would know that. But maybe the question, I think the question could be, so okay, I see in the chat that -2 of course is a big interesting thing. Maybe there's a confusion, or just to be more precise. Of course, we do discover what even we at CERN frequently call particles, but these are not fundamental particles. So we have not discovered any elementary particles, but what we do from time to time discover, and there we are really successful, is to discover the whole variety of hadrons. And hadrons are composite particle systems made of different configurations of quarks. And here we are still with our accelerators, with the LHC, which is the most powerful accelerator. We are the only ones who are able to detect them, or to produce them, to detect them eventually. And that is something that is ongoing. And there, I believe a couple of months ago, LHCb, one of our big detector collaborations, announced that they, I would say, categorized new hadrons, but in terms of new elementary particles, we have not found any. And the reason why I'm now stumbling around is we would love to do so, because the second part of the question was what could be, or what could be the idea behind discovering new particles. As you mentioned earlier, with the 3 generations, for example, we have really a lot of unanswered questions. The particle physics is really, really successful, and we have what we like to hold on to dearly, our standard model of particle physics that is really probably at the moment as close as it gets to a description of what we know. And it explains very much. It explains 3 out of the 4 fundamental interactions. So it does not include gravity, unfortunately, but it does include electromagnetic weak and strong interactions, but not yet on a uniform level. And we don't know if we can ever explain everything with just one theory. But even with this standard model of particle physics, we can explain a lot, or describe a lot, from our daily life. But we know, unfortunately, that within the observable universe, there is so much more where we have no idea. And I would just throw in the room probably the biggest buzzword, that is dark matter at the moment. And it's really the dark matter that is, I think, one of the most interesting questions that are out there. Because what we see when we look at the universe, that there is stuff, matter, same stuff as we are made of, stars, galaxies, but there is also a lot of stuff that we don't see directly, but we see its gravitational interaction on the stuff that we can see. And when we calculate that, we see that there is so much more stuff that we have no idea what it is compared to the stuff that we know. So we, if you look at the universe, we see that about 5% of the whole matter energy balance outside or within the universe is made of matter, of the matter that we can describe. And we by now estimated about 25% of the remaining stuff is what we call dark matter, and the remaining some 66 to 70% is what we call dark energy. And while for dark matter we have some ideas, for dark energy we only have the name, if I can say it like this. So you see, we can explain 5%, and that is good, but that's not enough. So any kind of new particle that we could discover, and we don't know if there are any particles to be discovered, we never know that, but if we find anything, it could be the hint to explaining what, for example, dark matter is made of. So that's why we at the moment are trying to exploit the full potential of our accelerators to see if we find new particles. That is clearly one of our big goals. Yes.
All right, great. Thank you. That was a very full answer. I have some comments on that. So first of all, the particle in question that was asked about is, if I correctly understand from quickly skimming some articles, is what they call a leptoquark, which is indeed something like a combination of what we already have. So it's not a new fundamental particle. It's whatever, a new cocktail.
Leptoquark, but to my knowledge, has not been discovered yet. So leptoquarks, we have ideas, and we found hints. I believe that was Atlas, where they put new limits on as to the existence of leptoquarks could be demonstrated. But that is something we are hoping, that something like a leptoquark exists, because that would help, that would open, it would be something new. To be honest, at the moment, we are scrambling for anything that is new. We would like to go for it.
As far as I can read, there's a hope that what has been measured might be a leptoquark. It's just not statistically significant yet to call it that it's there.
Yeah.
it's at a certain level of confidence that gives hope that it's there, but it's still not there. All right, but yeah, still though, right? Like I think oftentimes people confuse the term particle to mean one single thing, but there are really elementary particles, and then a couple of more particles. A lot of them actually that are composed out of everything else. CERN often finds those. Yeah, that covers it. We have a lot of questions rolling in from people in the chat, so I think we're going to slightly cut short the questions that have been sent in. There is probably one last question that I want to ask you from those that have been sent beforehand. And that is, if you could hand a piece of advice to somebody starting out their studies in physics now, what would that be?
Prepare yourself for a wild ride. It's something that can be from time to time really exciting. From time to time it can be really frustrating because it is not straightforward. I remember myself when I studied physics, there were months where I was really trying to understand one tiny bit, and it really took me so long because you really just have to think it through. And from time to time, I really got frustrated and I had to go for a run to really, get some fresh air in my head. And I think what I mentioned earlier, this kind of you need that in any kind of study. So it's not specific for science or physics in general. If you're interested in something, you focus on it and then you stay with it, but you have to figure out if this is really something for you. And of course, if it gets really difficult, you have to figure out, is it really for me, or should I probably look at something else? For me, I can say I was very happy that I completed it, because for me, learning about physics, what I said earlier, is an exciting ride. It is really exciting because you learn so much, and you learn even more where you don't know anything, and you try to describe the universe, you try to make sense of our existence, and some tiny bits you understand, and you're like, oh wow. And this moment of understanding something, I'm not sure if everyone in the room can relate to that, but the moment you understand something that bugged you for a couple of days, weeks, months, this moment, it doesn't happen often, at least not for me in my daily life, but once it happens, that is just a beautiful feeling. So that is something where physics can really help you if you're interested in being curious. But yeah, I think the worst advice is to say just study physics, is going to be fine. Let's face it, it's going to be difficult, same as any other kind of study. I mean, studying something is a really long-term project, so you have to be prepared for that. But it pays off. I can vouch for that.
I can vouch as well. All right, thanks for those answers. That covers the questions that were sent in before, and we have a few questions in the chat right now. I think they deal with something we could call common misconceptions about the standard model. So let's see if you can handle these. They're all about high-level physics, so it's not going to be an easy task, right? But let's see. So first of all, there's one question about whether working at CERN is hard, but I think we covered that. It's very dependent on what's your particular job, right? I think we discussed this, but then as we go forward, there are questions relating to graviton. You mentioned that we haven't connected gravity with the standard model. So there are questions is, how can you prove its existence, or why can't we find it, or what's the stuff with the graviton?
Yeah, what's the stuff with the graviton? Good question. Also good title for a book, if anyone wants to write that book, that would be nice. Gravity is really, out of the 4 fundamental interactions that we use to describe any observable phenomena in the universe, gravity is really the strangest one, in that sense that it's very weak compared to the other ones. So just the effective strength of it is just very weak, which also means if, and this is a big if we can quantize gravity, meaning that we can describe it with an associated exchange particle, an interaction particle, such as what we call, or what people have called the graviton. We still don't know if gravitons exist, because they would only exist if gravity can be quantized, meaning that there are exchange particles called the gravitons. But even if they exist, due to the very weak strength of gravity, those particles would be very difficult to find, because that is in relation to each other. And that's why There are some limits set out, and they are really, really unreachable for us, at least with our current generation of accelerators, and probably also with the future generations of accelerators. So unless and this is where we then go into the really hardcore particle physics, because you can look at gravity from this side, that you say, okay, well, if this graviton is too difficult to detect, we will never detect it. But that then also opens the door to other theories. And for example, if there are theories that look at our universe and they say, wait a second, we not only have the 3 dimensions of x, y, z plus the 4th dimension of time, there could be more dimensions that are hidden from us. We cannot observe them, or we don't detect them in our daily life, but there could be folded dimensions within our universe. That is more like a mathematical suggestion than a really empirical one, but there is nothing that prohibits that. And there are theories that gravity is weak because the strength or the effectiveness of gravity is folded into those different dimensions that we don't see. And if that were the case, then we should be able to get closer to either finding a graviton or at least explaining or describing how gravity works. However, all of these, or what I just described, are 2 very, very, I would say, wild theories. They are there. They're not, not too far from being super crazy. But of course, at the moment, we have no idea if that is true, and even if it's true, if we will be able to find hints that support this kind of theory.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. I think that covers any questions people might had about the graviton. Then there's a discussion immediately after the graviton questions. Discussion broke out about black holes relating to CERN. This
Absolutely.
is a common thing. Like there was these news that the LHC might conjure a small black hole and then we'd all die, and a lot of people reacted to that strongly. So can you clear this up? Like, can it be there? Can you create small ones? And what the hell happens if you do? And what's going on with that?
Very good question. I'm always happy to reply to that question in particular, because it's a very valid point. So first of all, what is a black hole? I mean, what do we describe as black holes? On a very general level, we mean something that we can observe. It's an object with very, very high density. So, once a star collapses, for example, it can transform into a black hole, and the density is so high that nothing can escape. That's why we call them black, because not even light gets out. Okay, and so what we like to call is dense. Very dense means a very high energy density, and black holes are part of our description of the universe. Now, the moment we built our strongest accelerators, currently the LHC, of course, we also said, look, with this collision that happened in the LHC, we are going to create a very, very high energy density, because after all, that's what we're about. That's what it's all about. We want to collide particles at the highest possible energies, and that will then lead to a high energy density. And then people said, well, but doesn't that mean that you could create a black hole? And then the scientists at CERN were honest and said, yes. And that's where the news picked us up. And then of course, a lot of conspiracy theories, or at least just very, very, varied reports were presented, because people said, yeah, you could technically create a black hole. Now, what do we mean by that? So the scientists were true, they were honest. Technically, we could create a black hole, but, and this is a very big important part, these would be so-called micro black holes. So they would not be stable. They would not be in any way comparable to the black holes that we observe in the universe. They would be micro black holes with a lifetime of in the order of 10 to the power of -17, -18 seconds. So, not even to the closest of being stable, but from a physics point of view, we could call whatever happens in this collision, and happens in fractions of seconds, is not really happening something in our perception. So we call that a micro black hole. But it would never be in any way dangerous, or even dangerous that it would expand and observe or suck up the whole Earth. That is impossible. And when we started to explain that, people said, are you sure? Because that now sounds like we spotted something and you're trying to make excuses. But then we scientists have the very good case that we can always look at what is happening in our world and what has been happening for many, many, many years, hundreds of thousands of years, because what we see is that cosmic particles, so very high energetic particles that fly around the universe, some of them fly towards the Earth, and they collide with the molecules of our atmosphere. That happens all the time. I mean, after all, that is the reason why we see those beautiful Nordic lights that I'm not even sure if you can see them in Latvia. I'm not sure if you're in northern up enough, probably not, but
like,
you know,
in very specific cases, you can hope to.
You know, from a Geneva perspective, you are really up in the north, so I was hoping. But, you know, we all know polar lights, or at least we have seen images, I assume. And these are exactly what happens when cosmic particles hit the atmosphere. Now, this process has been going on for many, many, many years. And at way higher energies that we can even achieve at the LHC. And in none of those processes, a black hole was created that sucked up the Earth. Otherwise, we would not have the pleasure of having this video conference right now. And so that confirms that our calculations, because we all know conservation of energy is everything that counts in this universe. So the energy you put in is the maximum that you can get out. And with our calculation, there is just no way that we could create a black hole in the sense that the media would like to have, you know, this catastrophic black hole. So I'm always a fan of saying the story in full. But the short answer is no. The short answer is we cannot create black holes because, you know, with all the caveats that I just opened, the short answer is no.
All right, thank you. That lets me sleep better at night. I think we might grab one or two more questions. There are still a lot of them are very detailed. I'm not sure if we should really discuss these, but there's one that's been like, it was sent in and it's being now asked, like, please ask this question. Okay. I have an idea what you might answer, but I'll ask it anyway. So we spoke about the 3 generations. Why aren't there for the 5th? This question is, so they are gluons and they come in varieties of colors, 8 in total. Why 8? Why not 9?
Yeah.
So is it the same answer? Like it's just there and we have no idea why there's 8, why there's not 9?
To be honest, I think the official answer is a little bit more detailed than that. The short answer from my side is, to be honest, I'm not at liberty to explain that. I would have to read up. So the thing is, I can unpack it a little bit, but I'm afraid I will not give a very, very sufficient answer. So the colors, first of all, they arrive from our color model for quarks, because what we see is that quarks are never, they never exist isolated. They are always in a bound state, either with a quark and an antiquark, or 3 quarks or 3 antiquarks together. So these are the only options we have. Sorry, no. There are also now exotic options like leptoquarks, where 5 quarks are together, but there is also the case to be made that it's 3 quarks and a quark and an antiquark pair together, and we call it a leptoquark. But that's a different story. But in principle, we see it's either 2 quarks, so a quark and an antiquark, which we call a meson, or 3 quarks or 3 antiquarks, which we call a baryon. Long story short, to explain that, really just to explain that, we never observed any colors. We cannot observe whatever it is that we like to call a particle. So we explain it to have colors. They don't have colors. It's just our way of describing it, because we borrowed this knowledge from optics, where we know that 3 colors, red, green, and blue, combined, the sort of red light, blue light, and green light together creates white light. And that is the synonym for neutral. And that's how this color model back in the 1960s was developed. So very long story short, quarks, we described them to have a color, but between quarks to stack them together, gluons are exchanged. And so that's where the question now starts. It's a very, very good question, a very difficult question. Each gluon, well, not each, but there are some gluons that we describe to have a color and an anti-color. So they have 2 colors. We have 6 of them. And then we have 2 more gluons that have 3 colors. So either all the colors or the anti-colors. The full background knowledge to that, to be honest, I'm afraid I cannot explain. I would have to look it up myself. But those combinations, that's why they add up to 8 and not to 9, because we don't have only color, anticolor, color, anticolor, but we also have gluons that carry 3 colors. That's all I can tell you. If you want to know a better answer, I would either invite you to Google or study. And if you understand that, please send me an email and explain it to me so I can give a better answer at the next Q&A.
Thank you, Jeff. I also wish to remind to our students, as I gave my lecture, I told them that despite the simplifications we might add, things that we might call colors and flavors and whatever, those are only our feeble attempts to simplify very complex mathematics. And at some point you can't really explain things like that, but you can get somewhere as close as you can. I think you did a great job with that. All right, thank you. I think that covers most of the questions that we can ask. Some remain unanswered, but as Jeff said, your next step then is Google. And so thank you for your answers. Those are great. We are now moving on to the last part of our Q&A session, which is the Blitz, which works, which you already know how it works, but just to remind everybody that's listening in, I'm going to ask you a question where you have to choose between two options and you must choose one. Normally, I tell people to limit their explanations, so they just tell their answer and don't explain it a long time. But since you're a very special guest and phoning in from very far away, if you like, you can give a larger explanation to whatever question you find fun. So there are going to be 10 in total.
All right.
So the first question is, do you rather like to work remotely or in person?
In person.
All right, so this is just, a warm-up question, fairly simple. CERN does both, but which do you prefer, theoretical work or experimental stuff?
I see where this blitz goes. Experimental. But I could also say theoretical, but because there's not one way or the other. It's both together. But from an explainer point of view, explaining experimental physics, I think, is a little bit more accessible than theoretical physics, and that's why I would go for experimental physics.
All right, thanks. Particle physics are often connected with magnetic fields because the particles make the tracks and they do the turns. And this is explained by the Lorentz force. So which hand do you use, the right hand rule or the left hand rule? You can do both. Which one do you use?
Right hand.
Can you tell people about the CERN handshake?
I can, but then we have to stop the recording because it's a secret CERN handshake. And to be honest, in Corona times, we phrased it. It's no longer the handshake; it's the secret CERN sign because you don't necessarily have to shake your hands anymore. So, but it is true. So I use the right hand, and this is just because that's how I learned it. You can do it with the left hand as well if you want. You just have to, rearrange your axes and redefine them. It's really just convention. I use the right hand rule. This sign here is, as you said, the most important thing, because without Lorentz force, we could not build circular accelerators, we could not detect particles in magnetic fields. So without that, CERN would not exist. And that's why, but it's a secret. So, we will very whisper now in the recording. If you ever see someone from CERN and you want to, tell them that you are on our side, that you are part of the science world, you can just give them the secret CERN sign and they will see and they will know. So now you know.
Now you know.
And of course, if it's someone from CERN and you give them the secret CERN sign and they don't react, then they have not met me. And then you have to tell them and explain them. And let's see how that goes.
All right, great, thank you. Next question: Atlas or Alice?
Alice. And the answer, because you made it very simple for me, because you could have also asked Atlas and CMS. That would be impossible to answer because both are multi-purpose detectors and they do exactly the same thing. And then if I say one, people would hate me, or at least would say, why didn't you pick our beautiful detector? But since you gave me the choice between Atlas and Alice is our large ion collider experiment, which is completely different compared to what Atlas and CMS are doing, I chose Alice.
All right, Jeff. In that case, Atlas or CMS?
No. Next question.
All right, as you wish. Supersymmetry or string theory? String theory is what you were referring to previously, right? With the folds and all that.
Well, it's one of the consequences, yes. I would go for supersymmetry just because I would hope that it's true, but I'm afraid it's not.
All right. Here's something slightly perhaps provocative and a longer question, so listen carefully. So what would you prefer? if the LHC finds something that confirms the current theories that are out there, versus the LHC finds something completely left field, which is unexplained by what we have, which would you rather have?
No question at all. The last thing. I would love to see something that breaks everything that we think we know up until now, because we know that we don't know a lot. Our current model is beautiful and it never breaks. It never breaks. I mean, now it looks like it might break a little bit, but we will see. So the moment we see something that really, really is completely out of the ordinary, that would make us happy. It's a very strange thing in particle physics. You never want to be safe. You always want to be challenged, because that means you make progress.
All right, fantastic. Since CERN is located in both, do you rather France or Switzerland?
Switzerland.
Because of the fondue, right?
Because of the fondue, and I chose to live on the Swiss side because about 2/3 of the CERN people live in the French countryside, and I live in Geneva on the Swiss side. And the only reason is Geneva has a beautiful lake, and I love to swim and run around the lake. Not around the lake; it's too large, but along the coast of the lake in summer. And this is just a simple answer. Yeah.
Okay. Another similar one. So you've studied a lot in Vienna, in Austria, and now you live in Geneva, where your work is CERN is. So which one do you choose, Geneva or Vienna?
For the moment, Geneva. For the long run, probably Vienna. For the main reason that in Geneva you have at best per night one concert or one theater play, and that is even once Corona is gone. In Vienna, you have at least 10 concerts and 10 theater plays per day. So if you make me choose between Geneva and Vienna, at the moment, I love Geneva. I'm really happy here, but Vienna is also nice.
All right.
I think that answer was completely not what this game intends. But anyway, let's go on.
You choose one or the other, but you chose both, but that's fine. We're coming to a close. The second to last question is regarding your work. You worked with students in your life, and you've worked with teachers as well, as you explained with the teacher program. So who do you choose better, working with students or working with teachers?
Students, always students, always students. Teachers are exactly like students, but just older. No, I'm joking. Of course, I love working with teachers. It's fantastic. But to be honest, so I used to teach at a high school myself as a physics teacher, and discussing and working with high school students, I think that is the best job I ever had so far. So no, students all the time.
All right, so then we have finally arrived with the last question, and you must really, really steel yourself. So this is a big one. We ask this every time to every person who does the Q&A. This is the 9th one. So you must choose between two mathematical functions. Which one would you rather have, the sine or the cosine?
Cosine.
Yes, yes. I'm very, very glad you said that. You see, because this discussion began between my course mates a few years ago, and we had a very big discussion about which is better, sine or cosine. So we included this question here, and we've been asking the entire season, what do people prefer, sine or cosine? And the current result is that sine has been only mentioned once, and 8 times people have said cosine, and the only sine is from my course mate who thought that sine is better. So if we take that out, everybody has said cosine, and that makes me extremely happy because I am a cosine person myself.
All right. I hope your colleague doesn't feel bad, because this is then a decision purely based on majority, and I don't think we should go for that. So I worship the opinion of your colleague, but I disagree. Politely.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for one cosine person to another. It's been really fun. And I think a lot of people who listened in also appreciate that you took your time out of your Saturday, which should be, you know, not a work day, but you're still here. So thank you very much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this.
It was a pleasure. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And to be honest, I didn't even notice it's Saturday, because events like this I can do any time of the week, whenever you want me.
Great. That means we'll probably contact you sometimes in the future again, whenever an opportunity comes up. Do you have a final message for the people listening in, something you might want to say?
There are many messages, but I think the fact that the people who are listening in at the moment are also spending their Saturday means that there is already a lot of motivation in the room. And I think if you can hold on to that motivation and use it for anything in the future. And again, I'm really not the one who wants to preach and say, go and study physics or go and study science, go and study whatever you think is right for you and figure it out. But then do it and really stick with it, because I think that is the most important thing, to really stick with the things that you like. And of course, if it's physics, then stay curious, because if it's really tough, you still have to be, maintain your curiosity, because at the end there will be this moment, and that's what we are all looking for.
All right, thank you, Jeff. That's great. Well, this then concludes our Q&A session. Once more, thank you to Jeff for visiting us, and thank you to all who listened in as well. This concludes our entire season for this year. Wow. So I think it's something of a great thing that we did this way. This is our only part that we did the entire season in English. I think it's a great way to finish. So thank you very much to everybody for listening in. I remind you that in the chat there's a link that you can send in your thoughts, how you like this. You can rate our lectures and our practical work. Also Jeff, I hope you'll all give him very high grades, because I think he's earned it. So please fill out that to let us know how to make our further sessions better. And I think I'll see you in September. Hopefully we'll be able to meet you in person, both Jeff here, we might have him fly over, and the students, you that are listening in as well. We're excited to have you back in our auditorium. So thank you very much to everybody who's been here. Absolutely, and we'd love to see you here as well. So thank you to everybody, and we'll see you in September.
Thank you.